Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan here. It is June, and we're inching ever so close to July and hopefully the start of Eagles training camp and NFL training camp sort of around the corner. Adam and I thought it would be a good idea to take a lot of questions, do another Ask ITB episode today. So we'll answer some questions that have been submitted to us, and we also want to hit some topics that are I would say topical, for lack of a better word. So we'll get into some of the wide receiver combos that Adam and I have been talking about for a while now. And Adam, I also want to discuss the tight end picture because we're getting some questions on that, and I think it's a really good question about where the Eagles go from here, knowing that Zach Ertz wants an extension and Dallas Goedert will be up for one at the end of this year. So we can talk about that a little bit as well. How are you doing? Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, man. Yeah. It was. Look, it's hot as hell out, but I'm glad we're able to get out there. Back playing tennis.
Look at you.
Yeah, get back doing that. Hopefully basketball in the fall. We'll see how we're doing there, but I got to get my stamina back. That's why I'm playing tennis right now. But it was good to get out while the weather's good. Look, we're only a couple days away here from July, and yeah, the receiver situation, Geoff, is there's some information that's just not correct out there. It was brought to my attention. So that sparked something in my mind. I'm like, all right, let's clear this up. A lot of different roles. The one thing talking to the Eagles about the receivers is they wanted more flexibility, Geoff. So we're going to get into that. And the tight end situation, look, we've talked about this before, and the challenge is, you got to be careful of how you structure the Ertz's contract. Look, Zach should wind up ending his career as an Eagle and one of the best tight ends in Eagle history. Obviously, one of the best, if not the best. Tremendous football player, great for the community, great draft pick out of the 13 draft. Chip Kelly's, Harry Roseman's first draft together. You see Lane Johnson and he are going to be in the Eagles Hall of Fame someday, but making it work at Zach's age and trying to get it to all fit in within the salary cap and not just this season where they're in good shape, but 21, which we've outlined. And by the way, speaking of that, Mr. Mosher, yes. we did this ITB TV with Andrew Brandt. And I got to tell you, if you haven't seen it yet, I said, and I know you very well, and I knew you would agree with me. I don't want to say it's our best show we've ever done, but I was like, Andrew's information was so good. I'm like, this is like exactly what you want if you want to learn about salary cap issues,
right?
Issues that teams are going to have in training camp in the preseason and regular season. Anything you could ask. And also we talked about Eagle contracts and the dummy years, which we've discussed before. So kudos to Andrew and Geoff. That was a fun show. And look, we got it in under a half an hour. Andrew was phenomenal. And if you haven't seen it, you must go to YouTube and go to our Inside the Birds channel.
Yes, absolutely. Inside the Birds TV. It's available on YouTube. Also available on YouTube. Our interviews with Greg Cosell breaking down the Giants, the Redskins, the Cowboys, and the Eagles as we did our NFC East preview over the last few weeks. So you can catch that on any podcast platform or on our YouTube channel, Inside the Birds. And of course, you can catch all of our Football at 4 interviews with 97.3 in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN, also on our YouTube channel. They're up every day around 5:30. So we'll be doing that again this week. So make sure you catch it there. And on InsideTheBirds.com, Adam, we've got some new material up as well. You have a story on NFL Notebook that I thought was really meaty on what coaches and personnel executives are telling you about the challenges that are going to be presented for this year's training camp by COVID-19 and getting everybody on the same page. You had some interesting notes on the Eagles, Bears, and Bills. I thought that was really fantastic.
By the way, the Bills one you got to see because, folks,
who would have thought Ryan Bates?
Ryan Bates. Most Eagle fans, even the diehards, which are our listeners, they probably won't remember Ryan Bates. He was barely with the Eagles. He got traded straight up for what's the guy's name? I can't remember. God damn it!
It was
Eli Harold.
Eli Harold.
Yeah, Eli Harold. So I thought not that Eli Harold was ever going to make it, but it was like a landslide deal. And Ryan Bates winds up making the team. And talking to the Bills recently, folks, you got to read my notebook. It's just one of these stories that you just can't believe. I was not aware of some of the stuff, and talking to them, they actually mentioned it to me. I'm like, what? I was like, I got to write about this.
It becomes more of a storyline now because Brandon Brooks gets hurt and the Eagles are looking for somebody who could step in and start at right guard who has NFL experience. Matt Pryor, the leader in the clubhouse, only 79 snaps. And here's Ryan Bates, who actually played a significant amount for the Bills last year, right?
Yeah, he actually I think he started a game. I know he started their final preseason game, but he played one game, a lot of snaps. This is just one of those stories like it's too crazy to believe. He talking to the Eagles about him, he did absolutely nothing. They didn't even want him on the practice squad. He was so bad. The Bills had liked him enough that they said, we'll take a flyer on him. He did so well, and you'll read this in my piece, that they kept him around, but the story gets even better. It's almost hard to believe. I'm not blaming the Eagles on this one. There's just no way you could see this, and I give the Bills credit, but thought I'd write about it because it's just one of those stories where when you're not expecting something and a team tells you this, you're like, wait a minute, what? This didn't happen. This is the Ryan Bates. Do you remember him from Mr. Penn State? Do you remember from Penn State?
Well, of course I remember he was from Penn State. And I remember when he got traded for Eli Harold. And that was kind of one of those, you take your camp ours, and we'll give you a camp body. They'll play in the final preseason game. And then, bada bing, bada boom. That's it. But here
I called it a throwaway trade. It's just like, who cares? But then who knows? So anyway, that's what we got there.
All right, so we're going to get into the wide receiver a little bit more. Before we do that, Adam, I want to remind everyone that for all of your grooming needs, you got to go to manscaped.com, use the promo code ITB. You get 20% off and free shipping. I promise you, there's not a better deal than that. 20% off and free shipping just by using the code ITB at manscaped.com. All right, let's get into the wide receivers, because you said that there was some misinformation out there about how the Eagles are going to deploy their wide receivers. So why don't we just break it down? We'll say what we know here by position, like X, Z, slot, and so forth.
Yeah, and I read a lot of stuff on Marquise Goodwin. He did, first of all, he did have an injury history early in his career. That's not why he was benched last year. What happened was, Geoff, I'm sure you're aware of this. He and his wife were trying to have a child. Right. They had some issues. It's well explained on the E60 show on ESPN. They did a great job of reporting. Philadelphia's own leader, Lisa Salters, by the way. And, it's a moving piece. And Marquise and his wife, it struggled, unfortunately, to have kids. But they did have one this year, and it's healthy. That's great news. But matter of fact, not only was the information bad on Marquise Goodwin being hurt last season, he actually led the receivers in snaps, I'm told, for the first 6 weeks. He just had the family issue, and it's actually written on the injury report. There's a designation now when players are not hurt, where if there's something going on where it's not injury, it says not injury related. That's what that was, as we just outlined. So when it comes to Z, we'll start there. Now we know that Deshaun Jackson is not exclusively a Z. He's a movement Z, but he also will be a vertical slot. This is something. Typically, Geoff, more often than not, your slot corner is not very fast. He's usually smaller, typically a physical corner, but not real fast. So Jackson and Rager, and we'll get to him in a second, they're going to be in the slot. They're going to be on the outside, but they're going to be when they line up in the inside. Jackson rarely will be lined up. Will be used to on shorter routes. It's going to be a vertical slot when they have him inside. But we know as a Z, he's going downfield, and we've seen that throughout his career.
Right. Now, with Goodwin, he would naturally be a Z also. He's only 180 pounds as well. So to put him at the X and ask him to beat press coverage, he may have played it before, but I don't think that's his specialty, right?
Correct. I totally agree.
So, right. So what you're really looking at for Z long-term for 2020, Deshaun Jackson will mostly, like you mentioned, Z, slot. And if you were to get hurt, then you have a case where maybe Goodwin goes and plays the Z if by that point Rager has shown that he can master the Z and move to the X. No, only natural.
Well, yeah. Also, though, okay, let's get to.
They want to move him around too. I know that.
Yes, yeah. Remember your report? I think. I mean, I think it's going to wind up happening. Just a matter of when and how. When.
Right.
So you reported like 2 months ago. So kind of enlighten our listeners again what you had heard.
Yeah, that their ultimate goal would be to make him an X opposite Deshaun Jackson, but also be able to move him around, slot, backfield line, anything, just creative ways to get the ball in his hands in space. But now Doug came out and said he's going to start off with the Z, and that makes sense because he has to learn the playbook first, and he has to, get off press. He has to learn how to use his hands, and then when you're at the Z, you don't get pressed as much. So that's actually a natural starting point for him. But if he can learn it and be a quick study, then they can start moving him into the X and the slot like they want to do.
Yeah, although here's where I would slightly disagree. I'm pretty convinced from talking to coaches around the National Football League who graded Arcega-Whiteside for last year's draft. I know the Eagles tried to cross-train him last year. He's an X. That's why they drafted to replace Jeffrey. It's not. I'm not saying that Reagor can't play X, and I'm sure he'll get some snaps there. But the Eagles are going to have so much sort of movement with their receivers, unlike really they've done since Doug Peterson has been there. They're going to have so much versatility that, in 2017, when the Eagles offense was rolling big time, it was about matchup. So some weeks, if everything's rolling and everybody's healthy and Reagor knows what he's doing, they're going to use him a variety of ways depending on how slow the corners are. There are going to be some sets where you have Jackson or Reagor in the field. How in the world, Geoff, could you cover those two guys if they're rolling?
No, that's going to be difficult. I think the best case scenario would be Deshaun is Deshaun. He's healthy. Arcega-Whiteside shows a big jump from year 1 to year 2. He's actually a formidable receiver.
Now. Yeah,
sure. And that would enable them to put Reagor in the slot and then move him around a little bit. But you could have Arcega-Whiteside, Deshaun, and Reagor in the slot. That would be a really nice pair. It would remind you of what you just mentioned in 2017. You had your bigger, physical, slower guy at the X, which at that point was Alshon, your faster guy at the Z, which was Torrey Smith, and then Nelson Aguilar, who was very quick, who was good in space before he started dropping everything again. He was a good vertical slot, and so you could have that recreated.
And I got one more for you. Greg Cosell had mentioned that Goedert is a little bit more athletic than Ertz. Well, because the Eagles are still going to be a highly numbered 12 personnel team, the way to kind of deviate from that a little bit and keep Jackson and Reagor on the field, or a Goodwin and Jackson, or change them up, is to have Goedert as the slot receiver and have Jackson at Z, Jeffrey at X, or Arcega-Whiteside at X, or you take Goedert out, have Reagor in the slot, or Greg Ward a lot. Some. I don't know how much Greg Ward's actually going to play. But the fact of the matter is they have so much versatility of this offense. They've never had this much.
Right.
The only issue, which we need to mention, it's very important, with not having an off season, we probably have to back off a little bit, particularly early on the season. Because if you read my piece at InsideTheBirds.com, I had a personnel man tell me that, listen, the level of play, Geoff, for the particular team that he was with in 11 coming out of the lockout, now the things are different. The players didn't have the playbooks coming out of the lockout because they weren't allowed to talk to teams. But the level of play was not very good early on. So the learning here for rookies or Arcega-Whiteside, who's not having a second year off season, who was hurt, we would learn earlier this offseason, he was hurt a lot last year. Now those guys are going to have to be pressed into service, but you got to give them a little bit of time to develop.
Yeah, I think watching all the rookies this year is going to be really interesting to see which ones acclimate quickly and which ones fall behind. And unfortunately for teams, like the Bengals, who have a number 1 overall pick quarterback that they're hoping can take the reins right away, it's going to be a lot for most. I mean, I don't want to make a paint with a broad brush. Some kids may just naturally pick it up quickly, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough if you're relying on a lot of rookies and free agents this year to really fit in with you.
You know what I see a little bit of, and we really have not seen this a lot with the Eagles since Peterson's got here. Some teams do this. We might see a wide receiver group by committee. You might see heavy rotation. We mentioned earlier, Jackson's going to be a Z. You're going to see Reagor certainly at Z. You're going to see Goodwin a little bit at Z. The slot receivers, Reagor, Ward, a little bit of Djax, maybe a little bit of Goodwin running vertically. X, Jeffrey, whenever he plays, we don't know, Geoff. Jeffrey is only an X. He cannot play in any other position. We don't know the first month of the season if he's going to be on the field or not. But let's say, okay, let's extrapolate this. Let's move this forward here. Sure. Let's say Jeffrey's not ready for week 1, 2, and 3. What do we think the plan would be at the X position?
Well, I mean, you would have to hope that JJ Arthego-Whiteside could play it. If
And
not,
who
they're in
knows?
trouble.
Well,
If not,
what do you
they're gonna
do?
unless Rager is a quick study. Again, that's the
Although,
big if.
right. Let's say that JJ is ready somewhat. You think you could play him 35, 40 snaps. Typically, offenses get 60 snaps a game. As you just said, hopefully Rager knows what he's doing. Let's hope, because he's only been at Z in the offseason, but he's not been on the field. We don't know, by the way, with training camps, if it's going to be extended, if they're going to get more time to practice. We don't know any of that yet. The NFLPA and NFL are still working through that. D. Smith, was talking to USA Today this week, and he actually was talking about that, some of the challenges, and he's been, talking to the NFL about what they're going to do. But they're going to have a plan here. If once Jeffrey's going to start running soon, so once he gets into training camp, he'll start on active PUP. Because you can't, once a guy he can't, if he doesn't start training camp on PUP, he can never go on it. So he's going to have to start on active PUP. That'll give him time to get ready. They'll monitor him for what he's able to do and not able to do, and they'll go from there. But the big issue for me, the big question mark with this team is who's playing X if Jeffrey's not ready early in the season. And Geoff just talked about it. Arthego-Whiteside's going to be part of that, but they've got to have other guys who could play, because you got to get at least 60 snaps out of that.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see who can step up and do that. I have a prediction that in the NFL this year, if this season fortunately goes through full, that you are going to see more running game than normal. Not from the Eagles. I just mean from NFL teams. I just think that's when things are difficult, that's the easiest way to simplify. And, team like the Bengals, again, rookie quarterback, teams like the Giants, the Cowboys have a new coaching staff. Washington has a new coaching staff. We know that Ron Rivera liked to run when he was down in Carolina. Matt Rule, new quarterback, new coaching staff there. I think you're going to see a lot of last year. There were
early on. I would agree.
Yeah,
with you.
early on.
I don't think it will be more than a month, though. I don't think it'll last very long, to be honest with you.
Well, we'll see. Last year there were 15,000-yard rushers in the NFL, and that was a jump from 9 the year before. I would predict somewhere between 15 and 18 this year. 1,000-yard rushers running back.
We'll see, but I still think it's going to be around the league average of 57% pass, 43% run overall.
Oh yeah, the coaches who pass aren't going to change their habits. But
although early on they might, because Geoff,
I think they will.
It's a great point, because the coaches. I actually talked to a head coach last week who's very concerned with just not having the guys on grass. As Doug Peterson was talking about, because even though this coach is excited, he doesn't know. Like, it's one thing to have this incredible amount of classroom work. They've never, no players ever had this much classroom work in the off season, but you don't know what they're going to be until you get them on grass.
Yeah, no doubt.
And you're trying to accelerate it. And as one coach told me in my piece, you can't go to 0 to 60. You can't do that. You got to go 0 to 10, then 10 to 20. You can't go so fast, because there's just no way to do it. You can't accelerate that because rookies need reps, man. If they haven't been on the field in the offseason, it's going to be difficult.
You had some really good stuff from those sources in your NFL notebook, Caplan's NFL Corner on InsideTheBirds.com. I encourage everyone to check that out. I want to fast forward to tight ends here.
Sure.
Because people are asking, and I got asked it, I think on 97.3 this past week, what do you do here? Because Dallas Goedert is coming in on year 3 here, and at the end of the year is normally when you would want to give an extension to a player like that. But Zach Ertz is their number 1 tight end, and he's very likely to get an extension, I would think. I mean, I have no idea what's going on right now.
They want to extend him? Yeah.
They want to. We'll see.
It's still where we're at. It's still what we had put on our show 2 months ago. I was told that we're not going to see a deal done there until Kittle gets his done.
Right.
And the problem is, look, the Niners have made him a priority. Kittle wants to set, he wants to set the market in a big way, and he should. But the challenge there is, Zach is obviously much older than George Kittle, and you make a good point here. If they extend Ertz's deal, and you could extend Goedert starting after the season, you got to make a decision on where it sits with Zach Ertz's deal. Because if you're Zach Ertz, you want to get something that's close to the top of the market. Right. Dallas Goedert needs to have the monster season that they're expecting. They're expecting a big season from him. He had the calf injury that really limited him for the first half of the season. Then you saw second half he was really good. If he becomes who they think he is, Geoff, I don't know how you pay 2 tight ends. Has there ever been a team that's done that?
Well, probably the Patriots a long time ago when they had Aaron Hernandez
Yeah,
and
but I don't think they ever paid
Gronkowski.
Hernandez big.
Oh yeah, remember they gave him an
Did they?
extension, and a year later he wound up
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
pulling
yeah,
out of
yeah,
this,
yeah,
becoming a
yeah, yeah.
murderer. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, well,
but I
that's
don't
one
know.
example, but I don't know of
Yeah, I'm
many.
trying to think of how many teams have really
It's
had
hard to
two
do,
tight
man.
ends the way the Eagles. So here's the thing: do you think Ertz gets his extension before, and Kittle gets? Do you think all that happens before the end of this coming year?
Well, the Kittle thing, the Niners really would like to get it done by training camp.
Right.
His agent, Jack Becta, has made it very clear to anyone who's asked
Hmm.
that he's not looking for your typical tight end contract. Kittle's the best tight end in football because of all that he does.
Right.
He's just a great football player,
Yeah.
and he's kind of a different tight end because you don't see guys like him run that well, and because he's an incredible blocker. He's just
He
a
is.
great tight end. I mean, he's just really great. And
Yeah, from Iowa, man, they breed tight
yeah,
ends.
yeah.
So, but do you think if that happens, will the Eagles get Ertz signed very quickly after, or do you think they'll play out the year first and then try to decide what they're going to do?
Well, I think they'll assess it. Let's say the range that I've put out on Kittle, I've always thought all along it'd be $13 to $15 million a year. I can't see 15 is a little bit. It would make 13 million would make him the highest paid tight end in NFL history. But because of, well, again, now with COVID, I would say the increases in the cap, but we might not have an increase in the cap. We don't know yet. That I think that in passing, that's kind of what you're saying. We don't really know where the cap's going here.
Right.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Here's what I think, Adam. I think that the Eagles are not in a rush to go back to being an 11 personnel team because they have a lot of questions. We've talked about this. After 2020, it's very unlikely that Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson are going to be on the team, right? And so that means they're going to have this new set of wide receivers, and we can't tell right now, and you probably won't even be able to know by the end of this year if Jalen Reagor and Arcega-Whiteside and John Hightower and maybe Quez Watkins.
We forgot him. Yeah, we forgot to mention him earlier. Hightower.
Yeah,
he'll be.
To make the team.
Yeah, if he makes it,
right,
Geoff. I think he's going to play some X and he's going to play some slot. I don't see him as
really X. Wow, the big thing on him was he needs to get a little stronger.
He needs to, but he's got height.
Right.
I think he'll be. I think you could play him at Z. He's another multi-positional player.
Right.
Here's the problem, man. For the future, okay, you just talk about the future, okay? We're going to assume Jeffrey. I just don't see any way in hell he's going to be with him in 2021. I think our reporting in a couple months ago is going to turn out to be correct. He's going to be on the football team, bargain miracle. I don't see anyone taking him. So Jackson, look, if Deshaun plays 12 games and lights it up, he's coming back at 21, man.
Well, that would be interesting. That's a big if. We got to see that.
I know.
I guess what I'm saying is in 2021, I don't think the Eagles are going to be ready to be an 11 personnel, 3 wide, 1 tight end team because we have no idea if all those 3 receivers are going to be able to come into their own, or if Deshaun will be back. So I think that it would be smart for them.
Yeah, but what if Ertz is not on the team next year?
Well, that's what the point I'm going to say is I think that you have to figure out a way contractually to extend Goedert after this year and also give Zach Ertz an extension. And I think what you can do with Zach Ertz's extension is you can front load it. You can put a lot of guaranteed money in year 1 and year 2 because you're not sure 2 years after that how much you're going to be able to get out of him. But then with Goedert, and you see this all the time with guys who get their extension after year 3, you have a little bit more of an even disbursement and you can backload a little bit of their money. So that way you don't have all this tight end money killing you in the first in 2021, 2022.
Actually, what you can do, I'll take it one step further. I would not extend Goedert's contract unless he's great this season. If he has a breakout season, if he from beginning to end,
so that changed all 4 years.
I would wait till because if you're going to extend Ertz, that gives you 2 more years. It gives you. Or extend him during year 4. Yeah, extend him during year 4 if he's doing well. I know the Eagles' history, Geoff.
Then you're playing a game, though. You're playing a risky game of now you've got Goedert at the doorstep of free agency, and you don't want to lose him. And
but you could do it in year 4. But you could do it in year 4. You could do it during year 4, but before the season ends.
You could, but that close to free agency, the price tag goes higher and higher. So, If you did it after year 3, you get the market value. If you do it when he's closer to free agency, then you're increasing the price tag.
I would wait. See, this is what I would like. If I'm the Eagles, I want to see how Rager does this season. Okay. We're not expecting huge numbers. I put a number of 60 out there. It might not even get to that point. The reason why I don't think he'll get past 60 catches, it's no offseason. I'm expecting Jeffrey back at some point. He's going to be somewhat of a factor. Goodwin is probably going to be a little bit more of a factor, assuming he makes the team than I expected, just because he could be moved around talking to someone who scouted him before. Hightower, I don't expect to play very much if he makes it at all. And Ortega-Whiteside, the Eagles are still bullish on him. I know it's hard to believe based on what happened last season, but he wasn't healthy. I mean, I didn't know that. No one knew that. I think his injury was underplayed by the team, but he certainly was not himself. And they want to take a look at him. And also, you mentioned Quez Watkins, who could flat out fly.
Yeah.
So they've got some versatility here. I'm very curious to see how this thing plays out because so much could happen.
No doubt about it. All right, let's wrap that up. We'll move on and start answering some questions. First, Adam, I want to remind everybody that sports are back. I watched the Travelers this weekend. It was fun. But casino games never left. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has an endless amount of casino games to play, all from the comfort and safety of your home. And right now, first-time casino players on DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino can play risk-free up to $200 for their first 24 hours of casino play. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app right now and find the casino games in the top navigation bar to start playing. If you want options, you could choose from slots, blackjack, roulette, table games with live dealers, and more. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino is a legal, safe, and securer than secure gaming app. You can deposit and withdraw your money at your convenience. Plus, DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has new promotions every day, so be sure to check the app daily. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app right now and use promo code ITB to play up to $200 of casino games risk-free. That's promo code ITB to play risk-free up to $200 for your first 24 hours of casino play on DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Pennsylvania only, in partnership with Hollywood Casino and Penn National Racecourse. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, we're going to go to our Q&A session here, our Ask ITB, and of course, we'll bring in our esteemed producer, Hunter Brody, who will ask us the questions.
All right. The first question is from Andrew Smith, and he asks.
By the way,
yes,
they're all from the Facebook group, just to make that clear. Every single question. Folks, the best way to get it answered is go to our Facebook group or go to our page on Apple. Rate, review, and comment, and I promise we will get to the question. But Hunter, take it away from these Facebook questions.
All right. So Andrew Smith asks, how long does the Super Bowl window stay open with the roster and with the upwards trend in the O-line's age? Does Wentz being there make every year an opportunity if he plays as good as he can? The O-line, although solid, won't last forever, and Cox is getting older as well.
You want to start with that one, Em?
It's a good question. I think the window's open for a while because Wentz he's a incredibly talented quarterback. They signed him early, which was smart. They've got Sanders, who's got a chance to be really special. I am concerned. You should be with their offensive line. We don't know about the left tackle. This could very well be Kelsey's last year. They don't have his successor. Brooks got hurt again, unfortunately. Lane Johnson is now 30. So Geoff, are you concerned about the future of their offensive line? Is probably the best question.
I have two concerns. One is the future of the offensive line, although I think the Eagles, and I credit them, have done a good job of at least drafting offensive linemen. Andre Dillard in the first round 2 years ago, Jack Driscoll, fourth round. They brought in a bunch of other guys, and Jordan Mailata they have some expectations for. We don't know how they're going to be, but at least they've addressed the position through the draft. So here are my concerns. The Eagles could be one of two teams. They can be a team that has a really talented quarterback, but just doesn't have the front office and the pieces around to capitalize on that. Or, Matt Stafford, I think, is a very good quarterback, but the Lions they've been a little bit of a mess from their front office to coaching staff on down. And because of that, they've spoiled, I think, some of Matt Stafford's better years. And so that's an extreme example of one way. I love what the Steelers and the Seahawks do. They have very good quarterbacks when Ben Roethlisberger is healthy, and they are continuously drafting good players and making smart decisions and surrounding the entire roster with enough talent to compete. The Eagles appear to be doing that, and I hope that they stay on that same plane. But I always have the concerns like, are their drafts going to pan out? Are these free agent additions and trade additions like Slay going to work? Or is it going to be too much pressure on Carson Wentz to do it all? If there's too much pressure on Carson Wentz to do it all, it's not going to be pretty. If the organization is rock solid and continues to address the right positions, then I think they'll have a chance to be like the Pittsburgh, Seattle's, New England's, and I'm probably New Orleans, another good team that has surrounded Drew Brees with good talent on offense and defense to make it work.
And by the way, you mentioned the Saints. Well, the Saints for years were terrible at drafting.
They were.
They brought in Jeff Ireland, the former Dolphins GM, who's an assistant GM and whatever, see their college scouting. He turned everything around. He got that thing rolling. Once, Jeff, they got rolling on defense. They drafted much better, really drafted well on defense. They're an elite team. I mean, I give the Vikings credit. They came into the playoffs and they showed them a front that the Saints had not seen before, which is great coaching by Mike Zimmer. But the fact of the matter is, when you draft well, you've got a chance to be highly successful each year. Look, the Eagles, you won't find a better team at free agency. They're just tremendous at it. Drafts, since Howie Roseman's come back, though, have been up and down.
Right.
And that plays to your point. We just don't know about these players. Dillard, yeah, he put on weight, but he hasn't been on the field, so we don't know where he's at. If you bring back Jason Peters, he's probably going to start, so you're not seeing Dillard for the first 2 years.
Right.
We don't know about right guard. If it's going to be Matt Pryor, can he do it for a full season? Those are the short-term questions. Long-term, though, Jeff's right. They've dressed a lot of areas. They're getting much younger. They do, as the question was from Andrew Smith. They do have some older players, though, as we mentioned, Kelsey and Brooks and Lane Johnson, Zach Ertz, obviously, Fletcher Cox, that and Rodney McLeod. That's it, pretty much on the older players. But guys like Avonte Maddox are going to get on the field this season. Brandon Graham obviously is up there, but their hope is to get Josh Sweat going again. Josh Sweat, though, Jeff, the thing with him is I just don't know how many snaps he can handle with that knee.
Right. That's okay, though. If he's a situational rusher and he can give you 5 or 6 sacks as a situational piece who is a 4th-round pick, you'll be happy with that. And it would be nice if Sharif Miller could play. If we find out Sharif Miller can be a contributor as a 4th-round pick last year, it's really important, Adam, this year that we start to see some of the players from last year's draft and the year before even really come into their own. And we've already seen Maddox and Goedert play well, so that's a thumbs up. But we need to see Dillard play well. We need to see who were else rookies last year. Dillard was 1st round.
Arthega-Whiteside. He's got to get on the field, right?
He's got to get on the field. Sharif Miller. It would be and then some guys from this year. Rager has to play well, and some of the guys they picked this year. So we'll see.
Well, you mentioned the defensive line, and that goes perfect with our next question. And hopefully I am pronouncing this man's name correctly, but Conan asks, considering Jim Schwartz's propensity for rotation along the D-line and assuming Brandon Graham, Barnett, and Sweat are the top 3 guys, who is the Eagles' 4th defensive end this season, and what percentage of snaps will he play?
Well, the percentage of snaps question to me is more prevalent than who's the 4th DV, or more pertinent than who's the 4th DE, because as you and I have talked about, Adam, you can't forget now that with the defensive tackle trio that they have, that when they're in their pass rush package, it's not going to be 3 DNs and 1 D tackle where 1 DN gets kicked inside. They may show that a little bit, but there's no reason not to have 2 of those 3 great pass rushing defensive tackles on the field. And so that really would leave you for most cases with 2 defensive ends to play the outside, and it's Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett. So, the Josh Sweats, the Sharif Millers, and we'll see if they add. My update is that, that things are still status quo with Vinny Curry. Same team's in the mix, still hasn't made a decision yet. Could be, any day now. So we'll see if he's even back. But the point is Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, and then 2 defensive tackles. That's your pass rush.
Yeah, if they sign Curry, okay, and I know they want him back and he'd like to be back, but it plays into this question. the hope is if Curry comes back, you have Josh Sweat, who certainly developed last season. By the way, Jannard Avery, they need to take a look at him.
Yeah.
Although I think Jannard Avery is going to be more of a stand-up pass rusher. The problem is you're not having an offseason, so you're not able to get him, use him in sort of a hybrid role, which they've never had anyone like this guy. It's hard to play him with his hand down. He's too small. He's got to stand up. But at least he gives you a different look, Geoff, that they haven't had before.
Yeah.
So the good thing is you don't have to overwork Brandon Graham in training camp. You mentioned Sharif Miller. You could take a look at him. Casey Toohill's an interesting 7th-round pick. Joe Osman's back from his ACL injury. He should be on the field in training camp. So the good thing is Graham does not have to play his usual amount of snaps if the backups are healthy and productive. You don't have to overwork him. And then you're right in nickel. You can forget the NASCAR package. They're barely going to use it. Hargrave and Cox, they've got to be on the field. And don't forget about Malik Jackson. He's got to play, and they're going to have a great D-line rotation. Hassan Ridgeway did a great job before he got hurt, and Anthony Rush, who they like. So fact matters, Geoff, they could have tremendous depth on this offensive line if guys are doing their job.
Pretty amazing that Jadeveon Clowney is still unemployed right now, isn't it?
Well, he's not getting the kind of he would have a job already if he was willing to take what's out there. But he just you're talking to the Browns. They still have a lot of interest in him. They're hoping that he sees that getting to play opposite Myles Garrett is going to be great for his career. But what he ought to do is take a prove-it deal, kick ass, stay healthy, and go get a bigger deal the next.
Totally agree.
Year.
Absolutely.
This is from Aaron Puga. The past few years, Eagles have been considered an older team, and with the recent moves suggesting that the Eagles are going to get younger, do you think that they would have had a better advantage this upcoming season if they were still an older team, due to the lack of grass time and younger guys still developing and learning the playbook?
It's funny, Adam. I don't consider the Eagles a much younger team yet, because I don't know how many of the guys that they drafted this year, the Jalen Ertz, Davion Taylor, Jack Driscoll, I don't know how much field time they're going to get. You know, when I look at the Eagles, I still think Malik Jackson, Fletcher Cox, Deshaun Jackson, the offensive line that we just talked about, which is more old than it is young. Darius Slay is not young. He's not old, but he's 29. Not young. He's 29. He's in the middle. So I don't feel like they are, quote unquote, a much younger team yet. I mean, they've obviously brought in some guys here in this draft, and Javon Hargrave is young. They're trying to get younger for the long haul, but I think they're a pretty decent. I would still think this is a veteran team, to be honest.
I agree. Their hope is that they're going to be younger. They're hoping that Avery gets on the field, Josh Sweat gets on the field, Hassan Ridgeway gets in the rotation.
Right.
Jordan Mailata becomes the swing tackle. Matt Pryor obviously is going to have to play this year. How much he plays depends on if they sign a veteran or not.
Right.
Will Parks is a younger player, relatively younger player. And Maddox obviously is going to play a lot, and he's young. So, their hope is that a lot of these young kids are going to be on the field, and that'll make them younger. But until they get on grass, they have to earn the time. And Sharif Miller's another guy. They want to see these younger players on the field, but you can't just put them in there if they don't know what they're doing. So time will tell how much younger they're going to get this season.
Absolutely. All right, before we get to our next question, I want to remind everybody to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com, covering all 4 Philly sports teams like nobody else. They are for the fans, by the fans. That's their motto. They have great content, good podcasts, as well as content on PHLSportsNation.com. So make sure you check them out, and we'll pause for a word from our other great sponsors right now. Okay, back to the questions. What do you got, Hunter?
Marlon Edmond wants to know, is the recent injury to Brooks, along with the depth at O-line, linebacker, secondary, and slightly the wide receivers, more of a serious concern with cap uncertainty if it is not addressed by training camp?
First of all, that's a very regal sounding name there, Marlon J. Edmond. I feel like we
attorney?
should have yes.
I'm thinking you got to
Esquire.
dip one of those pens, in the ink with the feather. That's what I'm thinking.
Excellent question, Marlon. What do you think, Adam? It's a pretty good question, because we've talked about the cap and how it pertains to certain positions.
Well, it's the cap issue the Eagles have is next year. Now,
right
now, the Eagles, once you get their draft picks are pretty much done. I'm told that they will not be official until they get to training camp. Once the medical staff goes through a physical.
Mhm.
So as long as they pass the physical, they'll all be done. So they'll be about 18 or 19 million under. Now, the issue with the cap is, Geoff, we're not going to know about the cap issue for all NFL teams until we know, is there going to be a season? And then if there's a season, if there are no fans there, Geoff, Andrew Brandt talked about it on ITB TV, folks. You got to listen to what he said. But I'll give you one nugget. He estimated that his guesstimate was about $3 billion lost if there are no fans at games this season. Well, how are you going to make that up? Are you going to borrow from the future cap? Well, that would hurt the Eagles for next year, and they're not doing well the cap next year. So they got some issues, my friend. I mean, obviously they'll move the money this year to next year because they're in pretty good shape this year.
Another reason, by the way, why it's very important for the young players to play well and showcase their potential. Makes it a little easier to move on with some veterans if you're really confident in your younger, cheaper labor.
Yeah, but I don't understand his question, though. Is he talking about – I don't understand how he says – is it a cap concern if not addressed by training camp? Well, what would the cap have to do with addressing – what issues do they have to really fill other than signing a veteran guard and veteran running back, Geoff?
Oh, I thought he was asking like if they have to go out and sign like bring in a Pro Bowl level right guard or trade and then pay that person. Does that hurt their cap situation with the other positions that they want to maybe bring into?
I don't see them doing a lot. I mean, Warford, I don't see them. Warford is an interesting player, but you have to be careful how much you pay him. 29 is not terribly old, and he's been relatively healthy in his career. And he's a good player, but they were not expecting this injury to Brooks, of course, and they've got Pryor who they like. I just don't see them spending a ton of money. If they're going to, it's going to be like if they sign a veteran like Warford, it's got to be some incentive-based contract where he's got to play. He's got to play 90% of the snaps to get the certain number. But they're in good enough cap shape here. They could do what they need to do. But their idea, Geoff, was to go with a younger group at corner and kind of let those guys battle opposite Darius Slay. Right. I still think that's going to be the case.
I do too. You got to let your young players play and see if they can get the job done. All right, Hunter, we got time for about 2 more questions, so let's do that.
Okay, this next question is something I actually think about myself too. So Scott Michael Schreiner chimed in. Deuce Staley is such an impressive coach, in my opinion. How much longer do you think he stays with the Birds before he seeks out greener pastures? He chimes in also and states this. He will be a great head coach, and I'll be happy for him to get his shot. But I will be so sad to see him move on.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly losing Deuce. Deuce has been part of the organization as a player and coach for so long now. He's like, it's hard to imagine the Eagles without him, but the way the question is asked, how much longer do you think he'll stay with the Birds before he seeks greener pastures? I mean, Adam and I can both tell you he's seeking greener pastures, and he's been seeking greener pastures. It just hasn't materialized for him. I mean, I can tell you he wasn't exactly thrilled that other guys got promotions and there is no official offensive coordinator. And the problem for him, Adam, and we've detailed this a little bit, is that by being the assistant head coach of the title, he's paid fairly well. I mean, he's paid like a guy who's been around for a long time and does a great job at what he does, which is usually mostly coaching the running back. So even if he wanted to leave and got frustrated with the organization, it's going to be hard for him to find a job somewhere else that's not a head coaching job that's going to pay him as much as he's making right now.
Yeah, you would have to make him, because, Geoff, remember the new rule now, the Rooney Rule got expanded and adjusted now.
Right.
And it includes also assistant coaches that you can't block guys for a promotion now. So the only way that Deuce is going to get out of here not to be a coordinator or a head coach is you're going to have to make him like an assistant offensive coordinator where you could prove that he's heavily involved in game day planning and play calling. For instance, if he could be the run game coordinator, he can get out. Like there's you have to prove it now. That's the language that
right
for him to get out. So I would say this about being a head coach. He's got presence and command like no other. I've talked to the Eagles coaches over the years. I've worked with them. They absolutely love him. He handles the running back rotation. He decides who comes in and comes out. He's really good at it. He's got a great feel. One of the top running back coaches. He deserves to be promoted. But the thing that we've talked about, he's just not a play caller.
Mm-hmm.
I think some guys get pigeonholed sometimes because some offensive line coaches I know, they're not play callers. They're like kind of like Deuce. They've got great command, they're great coaches, but they're just not play callers. So maybe the next step is kind of like John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh changed, he purposely became a DB's coach because he knew he'd never be a head coach as a special teams coordinator. Now that kind of helped him, plus a lot of help from other people around the league that vouched for him. And obviously he's been a great head coach. Deuce to me has got the kind of command that would make him a head coach someday. So he's got to get the league on him to be a head coaching candidate. That's been the problem here.
Pete Carroll, John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin. I would, if not top 5, definitely top 10 head coaches. They are not the play callers. So to your point, Adam, someone just got to recognize and realize that Deuce has been a fantastic coach doing what he's supposed to do. And he's a great leader, and everybody who plays under him only has great things to say about him. And hopefully somebody gives him a chance, and he'll prove, just like those other 3 guys I've mentioned, that you don't have to be a play caller.
Yeah, one thing on Carroll. Yes, one thing on Carroll, though, he definitely is heavily involved in the defense. At times he's called it over the years. But yes, Ken Norton now is running their defense.
Right.
But you're right. I hope for Deuce gets a chance to be head coach. I think it'll be a good one.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing Deuce as a head coach as well. But the last question is from Kyle Cipher. The little bit of a typo here. Is too many offensive minds in one room a good thing or a bad thing, especially with Doug calling the plays? How much input will each coach have?
It's a good question, Adam. I'm not worried about it right now. It does seem like a lot of influx of opinions suddenly, but I think because Doug is the play caller, and at the end of the day, it's going to be his menu that he's choosing from, I'm not as worried too much about too many chefs spoiling the brew. What do you think?
Too many cooks in the kitchen. I talked to a head coach last week. We were just talking about his quarterback situation and how he wanted to make sure there are not too many voices in the quarterback's head. Well, I know for the Eagles it's 16 and 17, and they've had a turnover obviously with 2 coaches that were coaching Wentz. The Eagles wanted to make sure there are not too many voices in Wentz's head. Like Peterson calls the plays. There's no question about who calls the plays here. Doug is handed off to Press Taylor to be the one who's in Carson's ear for the most part. That's really going to continue. That's not going to change with Rich Scangarello. Scangarello is going to help with game planning because he's been a coordinator. He's going to help be the filter to get to help the coach gather the information, kind of like Mike Rowe is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And Press has more responsibilities than he had last year. They're going to be careful to make sure that there are not too many voices in Wentz's head. You can't do that. Doug has got to be cognizant of it. I'm sure he is. I know he knows this. Because you can't have 3 guys in his head. You just can't. That won't happen. It's great. Kyle, it's a great question. And coaches really worry about this around the National Football League because it does happen, especially when you change coordinators. Now, with the Eagles, they're not. They are, though they don't have one because Mike Rowe no longer is in Phillies with the Colts. And they don't have a de facto coordinator. It's really Doug calls the plays, and he's taking input from a lot of people. But the big thing this year, before we move on here, in the game planning phase, in the play design, so many guys are going to have input, including Carson, who clearly will tell him, hey, based on what I've been told, he always tells him what he likes. Doesn't like that's what you do with your star quarterback. You want him to give that input. But they're going to have a lot of different guys coming up with play ideas this season.
All right, that'll wrap up this edition of Inside the Birds. Again, as Adam mentioned, if you want us to answer a question in a future episode, best way to get it answered is through our Facebook group page, the Inside the Birds group, or if you go to Apple, if you're an Apple user, and give us a rating and review, and please leave your question there, and we can answer it there. That's going to do it for Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. Thanks again to our producer. You just heard him, Hunter Brody. Check out his work on YouTube. It's called Sports Talk with Broads, and he's also got a podcast with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. It's called Process. So with the NBA coming back, you're going to want to check that out. And check out Hunter on Twitter at Broads81. That'll do it. And of course, we thank you for flying with us Inside the Birds.